Langrisser.
Hey everyone, this is Nitro. In this video, I'm going to go over the way to build Tsubame and then the way to build Florentia. So Tsubame I'll cover very briefly because as a character, I'm personally not that interested in building her. And the reasons for this is because first, she really needs to be 6 stars to be used because that's the only way you can get the maximum benefit from her talent. Her primary role is frankly as an assassin, mainly for fighting single target teams, but even there you have to be careful about how you position her, because if your opponent can move their character next to her and then use an act again skill such as chivalry or something similar, suddenly your character's hide effect is disabled and then they can attack her and probably kill her in one shot. So it's very difficult to position her properly to face even single target strike teams. And as for facing AoE teams, most AoEs nowadays don't target a character, instead they target terrain or they target self. And given that's the case, it's also very easy to take her out of the hide effect that way. But at 6 stars, 2 things makes her quite usable. The first is that for every enemy within 3 spaces of her, her attack and skill are both increased by 8%. Up to a 24% attack and skill increase. 24% is massive. It's an incredibly high increase. And this increase would also affect her soldiers, making her a very deadly assassin. And as for her hide effect, at 6 stars she can activate hide every other turn as long as there are no enemies within 2 rings of her. So quite viable there as well. In terms of skills that you would bring on her, generally speaking, you would choose to bring her 3C skill because it allows her to do an ignore guard attack that also allows her to retreat 2 tiles back afterwards to activate hide. For her 1 cost skill, you'll have to choose between ninjutsu, backstab, or instant flash. All 3 of these skills are great, so it's kind of hard to pick which one. Ninjutsu allows you to ignore terrain effects and also get extra attack when you're on defensive terrain. Backstab allows you to do fixed damage to the enemy before combat, and Instant Flash allows you to attack first, as long as you have more skill than the enemy and I think 90% hit points. And her final 2 cost skill is also a tough decision. You can choose to either bring Quick Step, which is like an act again effect that allows you to move 2 more tiles before attacking, or you can choose to bring Shadow Raid, which is a second ignore guard attack skill. So both skills are quite viable, depends on, let's say, the opponents you're facing and how you're going to end up positioning Tsubame. In terms of gear, she's running completely standard assassin gear. So Extreme Magic Bow, Last Rites, King's Crown, and probably the Twilight Star to have fixed damage before combat begins. Breeze Enchant would be ideal because her main weakness is getting into range to attack enemies. And finally, soldier-wise, I'd say Bandits because that's one of the few soldiers she has that does get some increased attack. Okay. Finally, I should mention her factions are Meteor Faction and the Reincarnation Faction, and her classes are really just Assassin. Last but not least, while her current best weapon is the Extreme Magic Bow, you may want to switch her to the dagger that can allow her to ignore 20% of the enemy's defense in the future. That dagger is not released at this time, but it will be coming, I guess, soon. So that dagger may very well be a dagger you want for almost all of your assassins, in fact, because what's happening now is assassins are struggling to one-shot characters. So with the dagger, reducing the enemy's or ignoring the enemy's defense, you have a much higher chance of successfully assassinating. So let's move on to talk about Florentia. So Florentia's factions are Empire, Strategist, as well as Reincarnation. Her classes are either the Mage class or Holy class. Her basic role in the game is the obligatory Playboy Bunny. We see them all the time in animes, so there was bound to be one here in Langrisser Mobile.
なんだありゃ。
入っていいわよー。
まるで悪代官だ。
どう？これで注目度バッチリでしょ。
そりゃ嫌でも目立つだろうが、長門はいいのか。
2着しか買えなかったのよ。フルセットだから高かったんだから。
そんなもんどこで売ってるんだ。
ネット通販。
なるほど。
じゃ
正直たまりませんそれ情熱を持て余す
No, realistically though, what she's used for is she's a healer and damage dealing hybrid character who can actually take 2 actions per turn because she has her regular action, and then after she does her regular action, she can actually use a battle strategy. Battle strategies recharge does require a faction buff to recharge properly, so in other words, the battle strategy element doesn't really come into full impact until the release of Hilda, who is a reincarnation tank and faction buffer. So Hilda is coming in March 2021. So for now, you can say Florentia, you can afford to spend some time to grind her up to 6 stars before she becomes really, really good. Right? In addition to that, also worth mentioning is that Rosenseal, who comes in January 2021, is an Empire faction buffer. So Rosenseal can also provide a faction buff to Florentia. So we're getting more and more faction buffs for Florentia in the coming months, which is why her battle strategies do become more and more powerful as a result. So because she's currently lacking faction buffs, there's not really any good faction buffs in the game for Empire, Strategist, or Reincarnation yet. So you can say that for this season, she is more used as a DPS character than as a healer. All right, more on the skill selection later on in that case. And the final few things I should mention here is that first, her mage class has incredibly high intelligence. Her base int in the mage class is 591. That's higher than any mage in the game actually. But her hit points is Wilder tier. She has 2,813 hit points, incredibly low. Alright. So let's move on to talk about her talent. Her talent is Imperial Conquests. And the effects are that when she's at 100 hit points, the soldier's stats are increased by a certain percentage, 10, 15, 20, or 25%. And at the start of each battle, so at the beginning of the fight, she will have 2, 3, or 5 battle strategies stocked up. So the amount depends on her star level. And finally, after taking action, if she has a faction buff on her, she gains 2 battle strategies. And she can save up a total of 10 battle strategies at any given point. These battle strategies are used after her action, where she may choose to use one of 3 different battle strategies that she has access to. The first is battle support. It costs 1 battle strategy point with a range of 4. And the target recovers 70% of their soldier hit points, while also increasing the soldier attack by 10%. The second strategy, Rush, costs 2 battle strategy points, with once again a range of 4. This one increases the target's movement by 5 minus the unit's base movement. So if the unit has 3 base movement, then it's 5 minus 3, which means a 2 movement increase. The third skill, Sudden Strike, allows a target within 4 range of her to act again. This one costs 5 battle strategies, so it's the most expensive skill, but allowing her to act again another character can be very, very important for any battle. Right? Just like how Liana's act again is often game-winning, so can Florentia's. In terms of bond requirements for Florentia, her second bond is unlocked by winning 5 battles in regular arena with Florentia. Her third bond is unlocked when you unlock her Imperial Chancellor class, which is her mage class. Her fourth bond is unlocked by clearing her 4th Gate of Fate with Tsubame's help. And finally, her 5th bond is unlocked by clearing her 5th Gate of Fate with Licorice's help. In terms of maximum stats, I mean, I already mentioned it, but Imperial Chancellor is her preferred class because it has 591 intelligence. Her Tactician class by comparison has 557, which is significantly lower. Finally, for Florentia's soldier boost, keep in mind that her talent increases all the stats of the soldier boost except for hit points by 25% at 6 stars. So effectively, what you have for Florentia's soldier boost is that her soldiers get a 40% hit point increase, a 40% attack increase, a 60% defense increase, and a 45% magic defense increase. Of course, all of these increases only take into effect when Florentia is at full hit points. So that's also something you have to keep in mind. So things like backstab, for example, would break the soldier boost. But if she can attack with full hit points, she's actually very, very deadly in the amount of damage she can do, given her incredibly high intelligence and her strong soldiers. On the flip side though, it's also worth mentioning that Florentia does not have any attack skill that allows her to do increased damage. So you can say that Florentia, when attacking, is more meant to finish a weakened target than to kill one at full hit points. Next up is Florentia's Heart Bond with the obligatory bunny suit costume, which is very, very sexy. So in her Imperial Chancellor class, the level 4 Heart Bond will have the following effect. When unit hit points is greater than 80%, your chance of being critically hit is reduced by 10%. At level 7, it increases the AoE damage she deals by 10%, and at level 10, all hero stats plus 5% of course. As for the Tactician class, at level 4, when unit hit points is at 100%, damage taken is reduced by 10%. At level 7, when unit hit points is at 100%, damage dealt is increased by 100%. And at level 10, all hero stats are increased by 5%. So let's move on to talk about her useful skills. First up is her Awakening skill, Resounding Might, which costs 3 costs, of course. So it has a cooldown of 5 with a range of 6. Very long range and a span of 3 lines. So it's a 3-line attack that has it's basically a 3x6 rectangle in front of her. The effects are the following. It actually has 4 different effects. First, when used, she gains 1 battle strategy. If this skill hits at least 2 enemies, she gets an extra battle strategy, so it provides 2 battle strategy rather than just 1. The skill deals 0.3 times AoE damage to all enemies within range and inflicts 1 random debuff on them. And finally, it recovers hit points of allied units in range equals to 3 times the caster's int and also dispels 1 debuff from them. So it can be used both offensively and defensively to heal up allies. And in addition, it's just a wide variety of uses. So this skill is considered one of her best skills. Next, Strategic Regroup. It costs 2 with a range of 3. It also has a cooldown of 2, which is pretty short, and a span of 3. It recovers multiple allied units' hit points in range equals to 3 times the caster's intelligence and dispels 1 debuff from them. They also gain a buff where after battle, they recover 30% of their soldier hit points, and this buff lasts 2 turns. So you can think of it, the 3 times heal is similar to, let's say, mass heal, right? And it also dispels 1 debuff, but it does also grant that additional buff. So Strategic Regroup isn't a bad skill. The biggest drawback is that it has a cooldown of 2, whereas let's say things like mass heal only have a cooldown of 1. The third useful skill for her is Chaotic Strategy. So Chaotic Strategy is a direct damage dealing skill. So you're not going into combat, you're just directly doing damage to the enemy. And the damage dealt to this single target is 0.25 times magic damage. Okay. It also dispels 2 buffs from the enemy and causes that unit's soldiers to be unable to attack. So this debuff lasts 1 turn and it cannot be dispelled. So Chaotic Strategy is best used on an enemy that has already acted so that you can make it last for the following turn. It has a range of 3, a cooldown of 2, and its primary use is to basically disable the enemy soldiers. So for example, maybe you can use it on the enemy tank and then start melee attacking that tank where the soldiers will not participate in dealing damage to you in the counterattack at all. Stuff like that. Finally, worth mentioning is the 1-point skill that Florentia would bring, and she actually has 2 really good 1-point skills. The first one is Winning Strategy. This is a 1-cost passive where when an enemy unit dies, this unit gains 1 battle strategy, and it increases all allied soldier stats aside from hit points by 2%. So basically making soldiers become more and more powerful. It can increase the soldiers' stats by a maximum of 10% increase, so it's a pretty powerful skill. Right? More battle strategies are always nice, and of course the soldier skill or soldier stat increase can always help in one-shotting or doing more damage. Right? So that's one choice of the 1-cost skill. The other choice of the 1-cost skill is the basic heal spell. Right? Not much needs to be said about that. 5 times heal to a single unit that also dispels 1 debuff. With no cooldown. Other skills of hers that can be used and are potentially useful are the following. First, Mass Resist. Mass Resist, the main reason to bring it would be the immunity to stun, immunity cannot be buffed effects, and immunity to mobility reduction effects. Of course, it also provides a 30% magic defense increase, but you bring it more for the additional effects that it has. She also has Mass Attack, granting units in range attack or int increase of 20%, and as well as immunity to attack and int down, and effects that silence active skills. Finally, the third skill of hers, which can be considered using, is Shield. Right? And Shield, the main reason to bring that would be for the immunity to cannot be healed effects. So you can see she has 2 other 1-cost skills, but both of those are utterly useless. So ultimately, you can see that she has a lot of skills that are actually useful. A lot of 2-point skills that are good, a lot of 1-point skills that are good as well. So it can be quite difficult to pick what skills to bring for Florentia. Alright. Next then is the upgrade materials for Florentia. Not much needs to be said about this page, it's just the materials you need to use to upgrade her classes, or unlock her Heart Bond, or unlock her Awakening, stuff like that. So I'll move on. Soldiers. Florentia has access to 7 soldiers. They are Forest Priests, Wizards, Sky Archers, Bishops, Exorcists, I guess, I forgot what the next one is called, High Elf Archers? Something like that, and Amazon Champions. Of these 7, the one that is almost always used for Florentia is Forest Priests. And the reason for that is very, very simple. Because Forest Priests will dispel a debuff on anyone you use a skill on. So what that means is Florentia, when using her regular skills on allies, will dispel 1 additional debuff, and as well as when using her battle strategy skill. Okay, as long as she uses a battle strategy skill on an ally, that will remove another debuff from them. So that's why Forest Priests are by far her most common soldier. Wizards may potentially be used if you plan to use Florentia to single target strike. Okay? And Sky Archers may also be used if you actually want flying mobility type as opposed to being ground based. Right? Keep in mind though, flying mobility type can be dangerous now given that people have Hobo in their parties. Okay? So those 3 are really the most commonly used soldiers. She also has Bishops, but there's very little reason to bring Bishops over Forest Priests. Now let's talk about Florentia's equipment. Now, Florentia is in an interesting position with regards to equipment because she may be both an AoE attacker as well as your healer. So how you configure equipment may very well depend on what you want to do. But here are some example ideas that you may implement. First is the hybrid set, which is, it can do both damage dealing as well as healing, but it's not a master of either one. So with this kind of set, you're probably going to run a Full Moon enchant for the maximum increase in intelligence, right? Because Full Moon provides 15% int increase. And you're going to run the Red Moon, which provides some int increase as well as some hit point increase. Tenyo's Robe and Tenyo's Headdress, both providing hit point increase, and Tenyo's Headdress providing extra buffs to allies. And then a Swordsmith Medal, because the Swordsmith Medal provides you immunity to both silence and immunity to fixed damage. So this increases her survivability by a lot and potentially allows her to stay at 100% hit points much easier than any other set that you would run. So next would be a maximum healing example set. So with this kind of set, you're just purely trying to maximize the amount of heal you can do. So the enchant here would be Crystal. You're going to have a Goddess Left Hand for the increased healing value, Tenyo's Robe and Tenyo's Headdress once again, and then a Holy Ring rather than a Swordsmith Medal, because the Holy Ring does provide that immunity to silencing, and silencing is the thing you're most worried about when you're using Florentia. The third set is a very extreme set, and I generally would not recommend it, but it's a set for doing damage to the enemy. So with this kind of set, you're running a Miracle Staff, Tenyo's Robe and Tenyo's Headdress once again, and a Vidar's Rose. So the Miracle Staff would allow for a chance of extra debuffs, and Vidar's Rose would allow you to potentially remove a buff from the enemy. Running such a set with Clock's enchant would mean that you could potentially have your skills get reset to keep using them. And the skills you would probably bring with this set would be definitely the 3C, Resounding Might, because if it activates clocks, it's always amazing. You'd probably want to bring Chaotic Strategy for the single target hit that can also activate trigger clocks, although you can always replace Chaotic Strategy in favor of Strategic Regroup. And then finally, for your 1-point skill, that one would be either the Winning Strategy, or Heal, or Shield, as the case may be, depending on what you're facing and stuff, and so on. And then finally, with regards to the final set example, this is a set of gear that I would say is more a temporary set, and it's also worth providing as an example because it's just something that you might consider running. So with this kind of survival set, what you're doing is you're trying to maximize the survival capability of Florentia. And so you're going to run a Steel Enchant, because Steel Enchant provides you with 10% extra hit points and 10% damage reduction. So what you're aiming for here is to avoid getting one-shotted by enemy AoE attackers. Like, for example, Ares and Leonhard may very well be able to kill Florentia in their own turn, simply because Florentia has so little hit points, right? Around 2,800 hit points. That's barely anything. So running this set, you're going for that 10% extra hit points and 10% damage reduction, and going for equipment that would maximize your hit point value. So once again, it would be Red Moon, it would be, let's say, a Galaxy Cloak, well, preferably Tenyo's Robe, but Galaxy Cloak might be a close secondary option. You have a Witch's Reminiscence if you don't have the Tenyo's Headdress. And then the last item is, once again, the Swordsmith Medal, because increased defense and magic defense and all stats plus 5%, as well as immunity to fixed damage and silencing, is quite key. Of course, it's worth noting that if your enchant values are good enough, you would not want to run the Steel Enchant. What I mean by that is you can theoretically get up to 50% hit point increase via enchants. And that's 10% from the weapon, 15% from the helm and the armor, and another 10% from the accessory. If you stack that on top of let's say extra defense and magic defense enchants, if you get those kind of enchant values on your full moon or crystal or clocks, you're definitely not going to need to do steel. Once again, I just mentioned steel because it may be an option for people who don't have that many enchant scrolls, or they may have lots of steel enchant scrolls saved up because they've never used them before. Alright, so finally, let's talk about Florentia's class mastery. And in terms of class mastery, Florentia should do what any other mage does. So you're going to maximize your intelligence by having it on every single slot. You're going to go for hit points with either defense or magic defense on the armor and headgear slot. And then on the weapon and accessory, you're going to choose to bring skill to avoid getting 3 times by Omega. As for the final slot, it's either hit points or defense once again. So this is about getting enough skill to avoid Omega 3 times while getting a good amount of hit points and int for survivability. And that's all I wanted to say in this video. So thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you found it useful. For the battle examples, I'm going to go over the battle examples in a separate video. So I'll have the link to that video in the video description. So thanks for watching, everyone. And on that note, Nitro out.